Donald Trump has revealed his choice to lead the Pentagon in his second term. The president-elect has nominated military veteran and Fox News host Pete Hegseth as the next U.S. Secretary of Defense. Hegseth has served as an infantry officer in the National Guard and has been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. He has been awarded 2 Bronze Stars as well. According to reports, he was considered for the role of Secretary of Veterans Affairs during Donald Trump's first administration, but was ultimately not selected. From January, Hegseth will be in charge of the world's most powerful military. The 44-year-old Hegseth will become the second youngest person to serve as U.S. Defense Secretary after Donald Rumsfeld. After unsuccessfully running for Senate in Minnesota in 2012, Hegseth joined Fox News as a contributor in 2014. He now co-hosts Fox and Friends Weekends, as well as serves as a host on the Fox Nation channel. Trump hailed Hegseth as tough, smart, and a true believer in America First in a social media post announcing the nomination. He added that with Pete at the helm, America's enemies are on notice. The Washington Post says that Hegseth's lobbying of Trump in 2019 resulted in the pardon of 2 service members who were accused of murder. He also successfully worked for reinstatement of a rank of a third who was found guilty of posing with a body in Iraq. Hegseth is an Ivy League graduate from both Princeton and Harvard, though his website says that he sent back his degree to the latter institution, criticizing it for its leftist-leaning tendencies. He lives with his wife and 7 children in the southern U.S. state of Tennessee. All right, for more on this, we are now being joined by retired Colonel Rich Outson, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation for Washington, D.C. Rich, great to talk to you. I have to ask first and foremost, from one military man to another, what are your thoughts on Pete Hegseth's nomination as Defense Secretary?
Well, it's good to be with you. I think it's an intriguing choice. And I'm glad that you mentioned Donald Rumsfeld in your intro there, because it is a choice reminiscent of Gerald Ford bringing in a young Donald Rumsfeld, who was about the same age and had less military experience, by the way, than Hegseth has now. Hegseth has combat credentials, as you mentioned, combat infantryman's badge, which means a lot to the U.S. military, as well as 2 Bronze Stars. And he's seen sort of what this is all about when it comes down to defending the country, the national interests, and fighting wars. He has made a key and central point of his critiques of the current Pentagon, that they've lost focus on the ability to fight and win wars, and therefore lost focus on deterrence and focused instead on social and cultural issues. And frankly, that's not just a Pete Hegseth issue. That's something that many people, veterans and former military leaders, think is a problem and a pathology that needs addressed. So with regards to his focus and his qualifications, I think he's just fine. He's a good pick. And he's also telegenic. That doesn't hurt in the age in which we're living.
Very interesting. And what are your thoughts about Elon Musk's appointment, along with Vivek Ramaswamy, to this new appointment? Some believe that the ex-owner, being Elon Musk, might have only gotten a half job.
Yeah, well, so look, Elon Musk and Vivek both have other interests, right? So the idea that they would take up a full 9-to-5 job in the government, I think, is a little misleading anyway. There are many elements of the United States government that essentially are comprised of what you might call part-time work. We have a defense policy board that advises the Pentagon. We have a diplomacy board that advises foreign policy, the Department of State. There are a number of different advisory boards throughout the government. I think without legislation authorizing a whole new department, I think that it strikes me that this Department of Government Efficiency is going to be something like an advisory board, and that wouldn't require that they have full-time work all day, every day in order to do the work. What they're going to be doing is some heavy intellectual lifting to look across the entire enterprise of the U.S. government and say, in the last few decades, since, say, Ronald Reagan, which was the last person who tried to take a machete, proverbially speaking, to the bureaucracy and to pare it down, what has grown beyond its original scope? What is too big to function properly? Where can we find efficiencies? So I don't think that that's going to require, again, that they be a full-time job. That's something that you can do essentially as an outside expert in bursts of activity, and then give that over to the formal bureaucracy to execute.
That's so true. Well, President Biden is now set to meet incoming President Donald Trump at the White House. What kind of conversations do you think these two will have after they meet and after everything that went on during the election campaign?
Every indication I see is that they're both going to be very cordial to one another. I think especially after President Biden stepped out from the race, I think that you saw a shift in the rhetorical contest between those two men to then being between Kamala Harris and now President-elect Trump. So what I'm hearing in Washington is that President Biden has promised everything his team can do to make sure that the transition of power is not only peaceful, but smooth and efficient, so that the transition teams, the landing teams, can get into the departments. And I expect that this is going to sort of open the key in the lock for that. Now, we've also seen evidence that there's still some bad blood on the Democratic side between sort of the Kamala Harris camp and the Biden camp. I think there's a lot of unresolved issues there and some hard feelings about how that transition happened over the past summer. So in some sense, there might be some schadenfreude. There might be a little bit of, consoling satisfaction for the Biden camp that this is how it actually turned out.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Rich, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us on WION.
Thanks, Liz.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.